This week on the For Virginia podcast, the theme is resist. We'll feature an interview with our own Nic McCarthy on location at Standing Rock, environmental news, fires and floods, solar projects, and the Atlantic Coast Pipeline. And we'll share some resources to help fight back against a Trump administration. This and the rest of your weekly news roundup coming up now. Thanks and welcome to the For Virginia podcast for the week ending November 27th, 2016. This is show number 14. I'm your host, Michael Brennan Wade. Thanks for tuning in. For Virginia is a Virginia State Political Action Committee focused on supporting progressive causes and candidates at the local and state level. Our weekly podcast is meant to provide you with news and analysis of politics across the state, helping you get the information you need to be an informed citizen, battle right-wing propaganda, and help progressives organize and activate where we are most needed. We've got a lot of news this week, so I'm going to get right into it. First up, we want to go a little bit off of our normal focus to talk about what's happening south of the border in North Carolina, not Mexico. One of the few good news that we had during election night was that North Carolina Governor Pat McCrory lost his re-election campaign to his Democratic challenger, Attorney General Roy Cooper. McCrory is, of course, the governor that signed the bathroom bill in North Carolina earlier this year, and who's been the subject of much controversy after businesses and sports organizations pulled out of the state. HB 2, the bathroom bill, that is. So, according to Vice magazine, or Vice.com, McCrory lost to a slim margin of about 7,000 ballots out of 4.5 million, but he has refused to concede the election. He's filed complaints in more than 50 counties, claiming widespread voter fraud with no evidence whatsoever to back up his claims, alleging he's the victim of a massive scheme perpetrated by the Democratic Party. Now, what's ironic about that is that Republicans control most of the electoral boards in these counties. And I think most people who follow politics in the state are calling it sour grapes. But what he has done is filed for a statewide recount and is trying to set it up so that the State Board of Elections can override the votes, delegitimizing the system in North Carolina, and basically move it into the Republican state legislature. Now, whether or not he succeeds or not, I think most experts are thinking that it's not going to happen, but I wanted to point this out because we're having a governor's election next year, and we need to look at this as a possible line of attack that the GOP might take here in the state if things don't go their way. And I'm not going to get into it here on the show tonight, but when we talk about Trump tonight, there's this tweet where he's claiming that he would have won the popular vote if there hadn't been millions of undocumented immigrants and dead people voting. So I think that especially if Corey Stewart, who's the ex-Trump campaign chairman here in the state, is the Republican nominee and he loses, I'm pretty sure we're going to see the same type of tactic used. So it's important that we pay attention to it, figure out what's going on with it, because we may have to defend ourselves against it a year from now. So read up on it. If you got any friends in North Carolina, you might want to talk to them about it. And we'll keep you informed as things go on. But for the most part, we'll stick to Virginia news for the rest of the night. So in ongoing news, we've talked a lot about the economy and the budget of the state. News from the Washington Post today says that Fairfax County is facing a dire budget in 2017 in the face of a weak local economy that is not generating tax revenue fast enough to keep up with the growing demands for schools, parks, and other services, including police. During a joint meeting Tuesday between Fairfax County school officials and the Board of Supervisors, County Executive Edward Long Jr. projected a budget shortfall of as much as $83 million in next year. Some officials are blaming this on the referendum that failed for a county meals tax. I don't think we talked about this last week or week before, but it was rejected by a slim majority. I believe it was 47 to 53 or somewhere along those lines. It would have added a small meals tax to restaurants and other providers in the state, and it was rejected, and so they're looking at this. So, according to Long, he suggested putting off about $7.5 million in planned police overhauls and about $3 million in funding for students with special needs. Promises for raises to teachers are also in jeopardy. Employee compensation and so forth. So this is a microcosm of problems that the state is going to be facing all over. For those of you that aren't regular listeners, we've talked a lot about the $1.6 million budget deficit that the state has. We've talked about the city of Petersburg, which has gone under management of a private company to try and get themselves back on track. I'm not sure who else we've talked about recently. I think Franklin might have been mentioned at one point during the week, but a lot of cities across the state are facing budget shortfalls, and it's a problem that we're going to be seeing all over the state, and not only here, but you look at other states across the nation that have been having these same kind of problems. So we might want to look to them to kind of give them an idea of what we're going to be facing. Hopefully we won't be looking at a Wisconsin or Kansas type of situation, but things aren't looking too good for the most part, especially in light of this report from Old Dominion University that says that Virginia is struggling to create private sector jobs, the state's transportation infrastructure is under stress, and unwillingness among communities to work together is holding the state back. So the full contents of the annual State of the Commonwealth report will be revealed December 2nd in Williamsburg. I might actually be there, so we'll keep you informed of that. Economic inequality in Virginia. 80% of the economy is clustered in Northern Virginia, Richmond, and Hampton Roads. And Northern Virginia has seen relatively strong growth since the recession, but that success has not been replicated in much of the rest of the state. We try to cover a lot of areas around here, but I probably have glossed over some of the more dire issues affecting the western end of the state. I mean, we know about the coal jobs and stuff like that, but again, this is happening everywhere, and this working class resentment that ushered in President-elect Trump, I think we're going to be seeing more of that if things don't turn around. And yeah, it's a problem. So last note on the budget is with regards to state police that we've talked about before. They are really hurting. Starting pay for a state trooper is $36,000, which is lower than 30 municipal departments in Virginia, according to the News Advance. And they've got a budget issue. They can't keep staff. They've got open positions that they can't fill. No one wants to work for that. Interesting statistic. The average monthly cost for the state police department is about $8.61 for a household. So again, all of this is coming due to the budget shortfall and Virginia's constitutional requirement for a balanced budget. Moving on to environmental news. If you live in the southeastern part of the state, like myself, you may not know that the rest of the state is on fire. A forest fire started in the Mount Pleasant area has grown to an estimated 4,800 acres, while another fire in Livingston spread to almost 1,000 acres and is nearly contained, according to the News Advance. So apparently there is a drought going on in western and northern parts of Virginia, Moving on to the Richmond Times Dispatch article that says that drought conditions are expanding and intensifying in parts of Virginia as a dry autumn wears on, but Metro Richmond remains unaffected. Most of Northern Virginia is in moderate drought, from the Washington, D.C. suburbs to Fredericksburg and Charlottesville. Extreme drought has crept into Lee County. This is the first time any part of the Commonwealth has been in extreme drought classification since 2010. It says the northern edge of a region of long-term extreme drought that encompasses much of Tennessee, Georgia, Alabama, and Mississippi, but excludes the Shenandoah Valley. But they are abnormally dry and may see worsening in the weeks ahead. Fires have spread across Nelson County and Amherst County since the weekend. At the beginning of the fall, there was no drought in Virginia. Now 28% of the land area is in moderate drought or worse. And from fire to floods, recent articles from the Daily Press, Washington Times regarding sea level rise in Hampton Roads. This follows news that FEMA has expanded the Hurricane Matthew disaster zone into Hampton and other areas on the peninsula, Newport News as well. The report from the Virginia Coastal Policy Center, titled "The Cost of Doing Nothing: Economic Consequences of Not Adapting to Sea Level Rise in the Hampton Roads Region," looks at the cost of property damage from coastal flooding. Estimates ranging anywhere from $12 million to $100 million by the end of 2060 if predicted sea level rise of 2.5 feet come to fruition. It also looks at the cost of a once-in-a-century storm hitting the area. Figures ranging from $611 million or $944 per household to $2.1 billion or over $3,300 per household if the sea level is 2.5 feet higher than normal. Now, this all came out before a recent meeting with Hampton Roads mayors and city councilmen, where a NASA scientist claimed that levels of 4.5 feet would be seen by the end of the century. And that just shocked the hell out of everybody in attendance, from what I understand. The news of the Virginia Coastal Policy Center came from the Daily Press. The VCPC is from William and Mary. And then there was also an article in the Washington Times about the region's vulnerability to sea level rise. Let's quote some figures from the ODU Center for Sea Level Rise, which talks about the 5-foot increase and talks about how areas that are not prone to flooding in the past are now prone to flooding. There's actually going to be a conference in Williamsburg on Friday, I think I mentioned it a minute ago, that we'll be attending, that focuses on not only the sea level rise, but of a new project that the state is entering into, pump treated wastewater into the aquifer. So part of the issue with the southeastern Hampton Roads region is that not only is the sea levels rising, but the land is sinking. I believe they call it subsidence. Norfolk is especially prone to this, and they're seeing like horrible times. So what they're hoping to do is, by putting this treated wastewater back into the aquifer, they can kind of prevent the land from subsiding. Interesting concept. Not sure how effective it will be, but like I said, we're going to go to this conference on Friday, and not sure I'll really report too much on it, but I will post some links onto it on Facebook for those of you that are interested. And this isn't directly related to sea level rise per se. It's about flooding at Lake Anna from the Central Virginian, how lenders and realtors are worried that sales of waterfront property are paralyzed, is what they say. The issue stems around FEMA removing Louisa County from the National Flood Insurance Program. And it did that because the Louisa County Board of Supervisors passed a new flood ordinance that did not meet FEMA's minimum standards. So as a result of this, parcels around Lake Anna are no longer able to access federally subsidized flood insurance, meaning there's a 6 to 8 month delay for the federal government to confirm that a land parcel on the lake is not a floodplain, and that way a mortgage lender won't require flood insurance on the house. So, for example, we bought our house here in Hampton. We're 7 foot above sea level. I think 8.9 foot or something is where my first floor is at. And that is within the 100-year floodplain, which means there's a 1 in 3 chance before I pay my mortgage off that my house is going to flood. And so we were required to get flood insurance. We've got the FEMA program, but apparently this is causing problems at Lake Anna. And the reason I bring this up is that all of the other regions in Norfolk and Poquoson and Virginia Beach and all those other Hampton Roads areas, if their local governments don't have plans that meet FEMA's requirements, the same thing might happen. So if there's an issue with this proposed development at the City Farm in Newport News that gets underway and they're too low to the floodplain, those houses, there's going to be problems. I'll just say that. So it's something for local governments to be aware of with regards to real estate. I know doing my research for Poquoson, they need to build out parcels of land on some of these high-lying areas, because if they don't, they're not going to be able to meet their property tax requirements in order to fund education and other city services. So all this stuff ties together, and it's important for everybody to be aware of it. So 2 more notes on environmental news. Buckingham County planners have endorsed a zoning permit for a natural gas compressor station to serve the proposed Atlantic Coast pipeline. The vote was 7-0 with 1 abstention, which was a Danny Allen, who abstained because he is a Dominion employee. Of course, the pipeline company had nothing but sterling kudos for the proposal. This note, though, opponents chanted as people left the meeting room, quote, "People going to rise like the water, going to shut this pipeline down." So we'll talk a little bit more about that when we get to the section with Nick, who's out at Standing Rock. The vote came less than a week after the announcement of an agreement in principle to allow kyanite mining, the largest private employer in Buckingham, to receive natural gas from the pipeline through a tap by Columbia Gas. Opponents questioned whether the announcement of the pending deal was timed to influence the Commission's recommendation on the compressor station permit, but the Atlantic Coast Pipeline, led by Dominion, insisted that it was not. So a little bit of bad news, but good news. Solar power is coming to Bedford. Town of Bedford intends to enter a solar franchise agreement with North Carolina-based solar developer O2 to develop a utility-scale solar farm within the town. And a 35-megawatt solar farm is proposed for farmland in Norge, which is in the historic Triangle. The company in that case is SunPower, a California-based solar company. And they'll be in James City County. 223-acre site. So some good news ongoing. Be better if we had Virginia companies taking a better tact on solar. Regular listeners will know I'm a huge proponent of rooftop solar for both residential and commercial. And we're going to take Dominion to task on that. And it looks like I mixed my notes up a little bit tonight, but we've only got about 2 minutes before I need to cut the break. So statewide elections next year for the governor, GOP contender Gillespie is currently the man to beat on the on the Republican side of things. Former White House advisor Ed Gillespie announced the formation of a committee for his 2017 bid for Virginia governor and said he will formally begin his campaign in January with a statewide tour. And Corey Stewart, who is, we mentioned him earlier, he was the former state campaign chair for the Trump campaign. This was the guy that got dismissed or fired or what have you after attending a protest where he said a lot of bad things about state GOP leaders. This was, I believe, after the Trump tapes came out and everybody was distancing themselves from it. But Corey Stewart is on board for governor as well, and he's been talking trash about Ed Gillespie, saying he's tried to distance himself from Trump during the campaign. So we'll see how that one plays out. I mentioned Stewart. Expect him to follow the Trump blueprint to try and run his race. On the lieutenant governor side, State House Delegate Eileen Filler Korn, who's a Northern Virginia lobbyist, I believe a Democrat, announced that she was not going to seek the office, leaving Justin Fairfax and Gene Rossi, who are both attorneys from Northern Virginia, as the only ones who have declared they are running. I believe those are all Democrats. And on the Attorney General side, front-running Delegate Rob Bell dropped out of the race to represent Virginia's Republican Party, trying to oust Democratic Attorney General Mark Herring in 2017, leaving Richmond Attorney John Adams as the only man left for the June 13th primary. Now, there was a lot of news that we wanted to get to about third-party registration drives, government accountability. We had some updates on the Virginia Department of Economic Development partnership. Our feature story last week, there was a lot of response to that from Roanoke.com, Pilot Online, and Chesterfield Observer with regards to how it would affect proposed business deals in the state. Norfolk looks like they're paying about $500,000 more to IKEA. The port terminal's expansion is going to cost Portsmouth over $3 million. And then the Tranlin Chesterfield plant is up in the air because of Tranlin's named in the report that came out. So a lot of additional news we couldn't get to this week. So it will be in the show notes if you check out the webpage. Encourage you to check that out. Anyways, we're going to take a short break. When we get back, we'll talk about Trump and Delegate Sam Razul. And when we get back, stay tuned. This is the For Virginia Podcast. Welcome back to the For Virginia Podcast. This is Michael Brandon Wade. Thanks for tuning in. As always, I'd like to ask you to go to our website at forvirginia.org, where we'll be posting show notes with links to all the sources that we referenced in the show, plus the links that we had to cut. Please share this podcast on social media, follow us on Facebook, and help us get the word out. We'd also like to hear any feedback on the show and ways that we can be better. So please leave a comment on the video, email info@forvirginia.org, or contact us on Facebook if you're interested in helping the progressive revolution in Virginia. And if you like what we're doing and would like to support us, please head over to our Act Blue page and make a donation. We'll even send you a nice button, pinback button of the For Virginia Birdie logo that you see on your screen right now and on our website. Thanks again for your support. For our main story tonight, kind of two different stories. First one's about Sam Razul, who is a Democratic lawmaker. He's Virginia's only Muslim American lawmaker, and he resigned last Friday from leadership in the Democratic Party of Virginia, calling for a massive overhaul in the party to reconnect with the working class voters after Donald Trump's presidential victory. He was the secretary of the House of Delegates Democratic Caucus since last December. According to Richmond Times-Dispatch, Razul said that Democrats fought a campaign against hate and fear and undermined their ability to communicate with everyday Americans. All we did was demonize Donald Trump and try to scare everybody, said Razul, who's a member of the House since 2014. He spoke out about the establishment, resistant to change, and rather than change the platform, the party needs to rethink its communication strategy to build trust and listen to people's concerns. Razul is from Roanoke. According to the Washington Post, he says, quote, "I feel as though the leadership right now is not committed to the radical changes we need to connect with the values of working class Americans. We were sent a mandate on election day that we have to completely rethink the way we do business." Now, I'll argue whether or not that was a mandate or not, but not arguing with the crux of his argument. According to the Washington Post, Razul is a business strategy consultant and has no beefs with the policies of the party. So Razul also guest posted a recent article on bluevirginia.us called "Winning Elections, the Science of Trust," In it, he lays out a 7-point plan on how to turn around the Democratic Party. He writes, "We should ask about how our purpose, strategies, and tactics are working to build trust. I believe that our Democratic Party must take radical, immediate actions to help rebuild trust with the American people." So his 7-point plans include fight like hell for what we believe in, build unity on values, not identity politics, be real about the mirror, forget the window. And to what that means is that having the ability to look in the mirror in times of failure, not out the window. I think that speaks a lot about the current DNC leadership wanting to blame everyone but themselves, blaming the FBI, blaming the Russians, not blaming their failures, or our failures, however you want to say that. Probably not accepting myself from that statement there. Continuing, the every corner strategy. To wit, sincere involvement means we'll need a multi-year strategy of supporting candidates in every corner of the Commonwealth. In the information age, campaign dollars have a sharp diminishing return. We can get more utility by investing in our message and organizing in every community. If our purpose and values are solid and we find and train good candidates, then our message will spread. Let me draw that obvious parallel to the For Virginia message and the message of the Progressive House Virginia PAC. A lot of these seats go unchallenged. 91st has been 3 cycles now with no candidate. That's why I'm stepping up. But we need to see people willing to run as progressives under progressive values all over the state. And we can't demean people that don't disagree with us. We have to make the argument and win the argument as to why these ideals are important, why inclusion is better than exclusion, why love is better than hate, why our ideals are better than those of Trump and Republican politics. We can't just have this high and mighty horse that we ride in. We can't disdain people for being less educated or having different opinions. We have to be able to make that argument. Continuing, those are my words, not Sam's, but his next point after the every corner strategy is embracing progressive populism. And he says, quote, "Robert Reich has it right. Progressive politics can win. The people want fundamental change with real ethics reform, big money influence out of elections, Glass-Steagall reinstated, and the end of gerrymandering. The citizens are tired of establishment politics. We must be sincere about ceding power to the people, as these steps are essential to rebuilding trust." And as a tangent real quick, there's a lot of stuff in there. If you're not following Robert Reich on Facebook, do it. If you haven't read Saving Capitalism, read it. The man is a font of knowledge. But with regards to big money influence, the Daily Press just posted an editorial today about some investigative reporting that they did as to how state government operates. And I don't have it handy in front of me, and I probably won't have time to get into it tonight. But the crux of it is that the state does not provide enough to lawmakers in order to run state government. And state legislators are unwilling to bill back the expenses of state government, operating an office, time and travel, legitimate business expenses. They're not willing to bill that money back to taxpayers. You can understand why that is. But the result of their unwillingness to do that means that they're more dependent on special interests and lobbying money in order to operate their offices. If you only get paid $20,000 a year, or it's less than that, it's like 17 or 18 for state senate or House of Delegates. If you're only getting that much money for what's essentially a 40-hour job, 40-hour week or 50-hour week job in some instances, if you're only getting a fraction of the money that you need in order to operate your office and hire your staff and run your office, if the state's only giving you a fraction of that money and you're not willing to go to the people or to the taxpayers for that, you wind up relying on big business. And what the Daily Press basically came out with this week was the figures of all this money that state legislators get, even on off years, when they're not running for re-election, even when they're not facing a challenger. They're getting all these campaign contributions from big business, special interests, Dominion, real estate developers, tobacco companies, and so forth. They're getting all this money from these people. And what does it mean? It means they are responsive to the needs of the special interests and not the needs of the people. They know who their masters are. And it looks at how North Carolina operates and how other states operate. I think New Jersey is one. We don't have any campaign finance laws. We don't have any limits on campaign donations compared to other states. And it's a big mess. And hopefully we can make some change. The gerrymandering alone, One Virginia 2021 is doing some great work there. I hope to God that we're going to be successful with that. Because if we can't get nonpartisan redistricting in the state, then it's going to lock down the House of Delegates. It's going to lock down Congress. It's going to continue. We're going to continue to see these. Somebody compared it to the Hunger Games, the way it was. You have these small, densely populated capitals with all the rural areas out around it. So we've got to going back to the every corner strategy, we've got to go and make inroads with these people in these areas, southwestern part of the state and so forth. Last 2 points on Razzles, and then we'll move on. Radically empathize and stop negative politics. So he says, we are disrespecting voters when we try to scare them into voting our way. It erodes trust, and it comes off bad. I think negative campaigning doesn't convince people to your argument. It might have the effect of making the other guys stay home, but I tend to agree with that. I think we saw too much of it this last cycle, and I don't know. It's gonna be interesting to see how his manifesto is met. So we will see. Moving on to Trump. We said at the start of the show that the theme for this week was resist, and I think that is exactly what we should do. I want to point out some of the protests that have happened over the past week. Norfolk and CNU. Anti-Trump protesters marched down Colley Avenue on last Friday night. I love the way this Pilot article starts out, quote, protests are not meant to be convenient, end quote. I can't even tell you how many times I had to say that when people were talking about the freeway protests or the Black Lives Matters freeway blockades. And, even when you look at the Kaepernick national anthem stuff, don't do that. Burning and looting in Ferguson. No, don't do that. Do it nonviolently, but don't kneel during the national anthem, and don't block a freeway, and don't march in the street. People aren't going to be happy no matter what, and we can't listen to the opposition when they're mad and they're talking like that. That means we're doing our job. So, the Hampton Roads Justice League Network, I got to give a shout out to them. There was a Facebook video, I believe. Last Friday was the second week in a row. The first week, they had several dozen people marching by MacArthur Mall. It was great watching it. It pained me to see all of the disparaging comments on the Facebook video, but it just tells you what we're dealing with. And I think I talked to Nick a little bit about this during the interview that I talked to him last night about. It doesn't matter if we have the majority on our side. We have a certain threshold, whether it's 10% or 1/3 or 25% or whatever. There's a certain threshold. Once we meet it, we'll see success. CNU students hold an anti-Trump demonstration. Daily Press. A crowd of about 36 CNU students and faculty members gathered Tuesday afternoon to protest what they said was a hateful rhetoric from the president-elect Donald Trump. There was an open letter from alumni. Excuse me, I don't believe it was an alumni. I believe it was faculty that said, quote, we are overwhelmingly concerned for our students who may feel that they are not valued, or worse, that they may lose rights or risk their safety by simply being who they are. Many of us have received and continue to receive emails, phone calls, or office visits from students who feel that their safety or the safety of their loved ones, friends, and classmates is at risk. I want to point out one site I came across the other day called whatdoidoabouttrump.com. Encourage you guys to check it out. It's got a lot of actionable items. They got a 3-point plan. Get involved with organizations fighting for your values. Make a plan for what you will do next. And number 3, protect yourself in case things get bad. There's some great lists on there. There's some great tactics and strategy. They have what they call a pod. Not sure that's the best name for it, but there's a lot of organizations that are fighting right now for social justice change. One of the main things I hear from people is that, we're spreading ourselves too thin, or there's too many organizations competing for not enough money. And I think that was made in reference to some third-party activities that we were discussing. But there's a lot of ways that you can get involved. And the important thing is to get involved. And I want to read this article that was actually in The Guardian, the UK paper. It said, Trump changed everything. Now everything counts. And I'll read a little bit. Read from it. If you're among the majority of American workers who just voted against the party, soon to control all 3 branches of our government, you've probably had a run of bad days. You felt this loss like a death in the family and coped with it as such. Grieved with friends, comforted scared kids, got out the bottle of whiskey, guilty, binge watched Netflix. But we can't hold up for 4 years waiting for something that's gone. We just woke up in another country. And yeah, I think what we really saw Tuesday wasn't, for me at least, was that I woke up knowing that I didn't live in the country I thought I lived in. Counterbalance that with the fact that Hillary still won the popular vote. Only about 24% of registered voters actually voted for Trump. So it's a small minority of Trump voters, and we need to continue to point that out to Trump supporters because, one, they hate to hear that, as well does Donald. But it's important that other people know that we are not a minority. People that believe in justice, believe in fairness, believe in equality. We're not a minority. We're in the opposition now. We need to think of ourselves as the opposition, not the minority, not as being completely shut out of government. Virginia is in a weird place because we're one of the few states that actually have Democratic leadership. I think there's probably 4 or 5. I heard a figure earlier this week. 4 or 5 states in the country actually have a Democratic executive and a Democratic legislator. Let me think, like California, I guess. Maybe New York, I'm not sure. But Virginia, we've got all of our executives, governor, lieutenant governor, and attorney general. And we've got term limits on the governor. So McAuliffe's gone next year. There's no telling how that's going to go. Obviously, we've got near tie in the Senate, and we've got just enough to prevent a veto in the House of Delegates. So we are right on the edge, and this thing could go either way next year. And I think it's good that we're on the defensive at this point because it means we're going to work harder than we would have otherwise. But continuing the Guardian article, it's hard to guess much from Trump's campaign promises, but we know the goals of the legislators now taking charge, plus Trump's VP and those he's tapping to head our government agencies. And I'm sure everybody has seen all of the appointments, Bannon and the rest of the crew. I think Trump has already stopped taking the national security briefings. He's basically handing over control of the government to Mike Pence because he doesn't want to do the work of being president. He just wants to be president. Continue on. Losses are coming at us in these areas: freedom of speech and the press, women's reproductive rights, affordable health care, security for immigrants and Muslims, racial and LGBTQ civil rights, environmental protection, scientific research and education, international cooperation on limiting climate change, international cooperation on anything, any restraints on who may possess firearms, restraint on the upper class wealth accumulation that's gutting our middle class, limits on corporate influence over all our laws. That's the opening volley. God help us what he plans on doing after that. I mean, that list seems pretty comprehensive to me. I mean, there were 10, 12 items there, and that's scary. We have got to fight. We went to bed as voters, and we got up as outsiders to the program. We crave to believe our country is still safe for the mainstream folks like us and the things we hold dear. Our civic momentum is to trust the famous checks and balances and resist any notion of a new era that will require a new kind of response. And there's just so much work to do. We've got some friends who are in North Dakota right now with the water protectors. We've got people right here in Hampton Roads who are planning actions for this week against companies aligned with the pipeline. I won't get into too many details. I don't want to give too much information away. But I think that the North Dakota Access Pipeline is probably the start of the revolution. If we cannot be successful there, I'm not sure what it means for our success in the future. We have to have success in moving that pipeline, if not shutting it down completely, but it has to be moved. And hopefully we can pressure Obama or members of Congress to shut it down. But if we can't stop something like this under a Democratic administration, regardless of whether it's got 60 days left or whatever, but God help us what we're going to do under a Trump one. I mean, I posted a tweet to Facebook earlier that he made about illegal immigrants voting, how he would have won the popular vote. I've argued with people on Facebook about this, claiming, I think I said it before tonight, but if somebody mentions Trump won, get over it. Here's how the argument inevitably goes. Clinton won by 2 million votes. And then the other side says, well, if it wasn't for illegal immigrants voting and dead people registrations, Trump would have won the popular vote as well. And, somebody says some stuff like that, I think you just need to move on. We're not going to argue the facts with these people anymore. We have to just use direct action and hope that we can convince the young generation. I think 18 to 25-year-olds are on our side. We have to reach out to them and help them, millennials, in whatever way. I mean, once you start getting to my age, 37 years old and Generation X or whatever you want to call us, I'm kind of in the middle of those. But most people have already made up their mind, and it doesn't matter how much time you spend trying to convince them of the facts. I think it's a lost cause at some point, but I hate to be a cynic about it. But I don't have all the answers. I'm just out here trying to give you guys my thoughts, a little bit about the news each week, my thoughts on what it means. And I want to hear back from you guys, and I want to hear your voices. So if you got something to say, call me up, hit me up on Facebook. I'd love to have you guys on the program, do an interview. We're going to have Nick coming up here in a minute. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we're going to have our interview that we recorded with him last night from North Dakota. Stay tuned. Welcome back to the Fort Virginia podcast. Last night, we had the pleasure of speaking with our friend, Nic McCarthy. He is a friend of ours from Charlottesville. He was a Bernie delegate to the state convention. He was an early supporter of Fort Virginia and the work we're doing. So we got to thank Nick for that. And we learned last week or 2 weeks ago that he was traveling to support the water protectors in North Dakota. So he got arrested just a day after getting there, kind of by accident, I guess. He didn't want to talk too much about it in this interview. I understand why. It's an ongoing legal effort, but we spoke to him about why he went and why the effort in North Dakota is so important.
All right, Nick. So how was the trip?
I don't know. I'm still trying to put into words some of the things that I've seen and feel, to be honest. Still processing.
I got you. What made you decide to go down there?
I'd seen Standing Rock for a while, and I wanted to find some way to help, whether it be or getting people to call on behalf of Standing Rock to the representatives or to the Army Corps of Engineers or whichever party, we need to kind of put a little pressure on to make sure that the folks there were getting what they needed. But I just started to feel that wasn't enough, and that I could use some of the organizing experience that I'd learned from, working pain. And I just made a trip. I think other people were doing it, and I said, I think that it would be powerful if Virginians could get there, because then no one could say, oh, too far. If people from Virginia were going.
So how many people did you go with? Was it a large group, or how many people?
Oh, it was a fair size. We got 14 people out here, and there are other people from Virginia that have come since, that sort of rallying cry. Not all were inspired from, some of the posts I was putting out. Some were, of course, part of the things they had seen. But it was exciting to see we're able to kind of coordinate with and there are still people coming from, and some folks that have come that just had planned to spend a couple of days are planning to come back again because they've been so deeply moved by the people here. It's just so much more real when you've met these people and they feel like your neighbors because you've been living together. And so
what day did you get down there?
On Wednesday. Or was it Thursday?
And,
Gosh.
You got arrested on what, Thursday?
Yeah, didn't take long, did it? Friday, I think it was. Friday, actually. What day is today? Today, Saturday? Yeah, yesterday.
So I know the videos on Facebook, so you were basically recording them. Just for people that haven't seen it, they were protesting inside of a mall, I believe, and then the police came to arrest them for trespassing, and you started videotaping the arrests, and next thing you know, you got picked up.
Yeah, it came as a real surprise, to be honest. Just seeing how quickly the escalation of force was I mean, I'm shocked but I couldn't help but just be flabbergasted by seeing that a people in a circle that wanted to pray were tackled and thrown to the ground violently. And most folks, there may have been some folks that may have resisting arrest, because I didn't see everyone. But anyone I saw wasn't doing that. They were cooperating, and to be treated like that. I mean, if they were sitting in a circle and singing Christmas carols, I don't think that would have happened. It's just, I mean, we know these sort of things happen, but it's just another thing to actually be there and to see it, and because I've always tried so hard to empathize with police officers. Well, I shouldn't say try so hard, because I don't find it difficult, because I can understand these cases where I feel there has been police brutality. I can understand how the officer may be feeling and why she or he may have acted like that in that situation. And I may think that police officer still needs to be held accountable, or there needs to be some sort of way forward to make sure that can be prevented. But when I saw it here, I just couldn't get it. I was like, why are you choosing to respond like this? You're not no one's posing any danger to you. No one here has given you any cause for any of it.
Status quo and danger to the powers that be, I guess. The latest news I heard was that the Army Corps of Engineers plans on shutting these camps down on December 5th. How is the news being taken down there?
I think there was a lot of anxiety kind of that spread throughout the camp, but a lot of, hey, let's keep that in check. Let's not start trying to cause it. There's a lot of, sometimes there's rumors or things that aren't rumors, that things that are true that people hear, and you can feel the whole whole community here, the whole camp. There's air and how people react to each other, because it's normally a very positive place.
Mm-hmm.
But the elders seemed very resolute. They seemed confident. They said, that we plan on staying and we plan on being a careful presence here. So that seems to be what they're dedicated to. And they seem to not believe that this is forced. They just couldn't imagine that they would be evicted.
So back to your arrest real quick. Were you formally charged, or was this just they were just held you and released you, or catch and release as they call it?
No, I actually would love to talk about it, but I'm going to follow their counsel and wait until a path.
Yeah, we can wait. I just wanted to check in with you because I know you're down there now, and I just wanted to talk to you personally and let people know whatever you had to say. So, how many people would you say are down there right now? I mean, I've heard 5,000. Would you say it's around that, or?
Oh yeah, and it's growing. Yeah, people are like, I'm sitting right now. There's a line of cars trying to get in.
I know this veteran, I forget the name of the organization, but it was some kind of veterans that were planning on coming down there in mass. I can only imagine what it's going to look like. I mean, we all remember, my friend Rob Waters was talking about, the way that Occupy got shut down. I have a feeling this is going to be even more significant, I guess. So, be safe down there. What can we do, people that can't get down there? I know there's a lot of, just sending supplies in the mail, or there are certain organizations that you'd recommend people deal with as far as doing that. I know people are sending shelters and all kinds of other projects. I mean, what's the best way for people to support you guys, if they have, however they can help?
That's awesome that you're asking, Mike. It's kind of, it depends on which camp. There are different camps, and I know that it starts to sound a little complicated, but they have different focuses. The one that most people have been sending to is the one I'm at right now, and I'm going to mispronounce it a little bit, the Sacco. There are lists online, but they're a little out of date. So that's actually something that some Virginians that are still here and I are working on, is creating a more up-to-date, precise list. We've been going around to different places in the camp. I mean, it's when we say camp, I mean it's pretty much like a little town. They have a construction tent, they have a construction area where they have like a blacksmith. They have several kitchens. They have a medic tent. They have a midwives tent for those that are pregnant. I mean, you name it. Just imagine the Wild West.
They had their first birth down there a few days ago, I believe.
Yeah. It's just like if you imagined like a little town starting to develop. It's pretty much like that with more makeshift sort of settlements, but it's becoming more permanent. So we're working on making a list. Oh, yeah, and I was just going to say, if you can reach out to the Army Corps, there's some numbers, and I can send those as well, or to the Situation Room. Some people have been doing that. The Situation Room is kind of, at one point, just immediately started picking up the phone and always immediately responding about Standing Rock because of the people that have been
You're not talking about the CNN Situation Room, are you?
No, I mean the White House situation.
Oh, okay. Sorry.
But yeah, if just put a little pressure. To be one of the things that the elder council did was sort of call out President Obama, saying you said that you would stand with the first people of the United States, that you would respect the sovereignty of the indigenous peoples. Where are you? You pardoned turkeys on Thanksgiving, but you said nothing about what's been going on. So if we can put a little...
The irony of this all happening on Thanksgiving as well has not been lost on many people.
Not been lost on, the folks that have been able to, learn about what's happening. And, before I left, and I was seeking donations from some of the businesses and farms that donated to us supplies that we brought here. And again, I want to thank them for their generosity. Most of them have said, "What is Standing Rock? What do you mean? What's this all?" They'd never even heard of it. So I think it's great what you're doing just to spread the word a little bit.
People outside of it, so
yeah. I think that just kind of talk about it and just maybe send supplies, but also just maybe bring it up at the water cooler. That's something. Hey, have you heard about what's going on? What's that about? And you can have an open-ended discussion about it, but I think it's something that needs to be discussed, something that needs to be on the, spoken about around the and around the water coolers of America.
So you bring that up. So I've had a few discussions with people. I think the water cannon video from last week spurred some discussion, and when you're talking to somebody who knows about it, but I guess opposed to the protesters, or I hate to even use the word protesters because it's buying into this oppositional frame, but when you hear, well, the water protectors were setting cars on fire and they were throwing rocks with slings, and this one cop got a hit on his head. I mean, how do you respond to people when they see this aggression from the side of the government protecting the business interests here and trying to intentionally injure people, and the one woman who I don't know if she lost her arm or almost lost her arm, and then the water cannons and sub-freezing temperatures. I mean, how do you respond to people who knee-jerk reaction is to blame the water protectors for allegedly throwing rocks or stuff like that? I mean, what's your take on that?
Well, I think we need to consider what's happening. One, who are they protecting? These officers. Who are they protecting? What?
Right.
What are
even
they?
The Army Corps of Engineers, their excuse for shutting down this camp is to protect people from the harsh Dakota winter. I thought that was newspeak if I ever heard it. So.
And who?
So the stuff that we saw on TV, I mean, is that happening every night? I mean, are there actions taking place every night as far as, I know I've seen, people crossing these bridges, these little makeshift bridges, and I heard about police tearing the bridges down and so forth. I mean, like what's happening on a night by night basis? I mean, are there confrontations every day, every night, or is it pretty, sporadic or whatever?
I'd say it's there are different direct actions, and not all of them take the form of what we have seen, getting the most views. There's a lot of very prayerful direct actions where people get together in a circle and sing to the police, or just maybe take part in a blessing of the water. And I wouldn't call myself a spiritual person. I wouldn't call myself a religious person. But I think there is power in a group of people coming together and I think reflecting. I think prayer can have a psychological impact on an individual and on a group psychology.
Right.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that can be part of the strategy. To be honest, I don't think that, although there have been some officers that have resigned, and even there's a couple officers in the camp who are now aiding us because their consciences got the better of them. I think really this is something that, like most civil disobedience is it's a trial in the public's opinion, and it doesn't have to be the majority of the Americans that feel this is the right thing to do. I mean, and I know everyone always goes back to Martin Luther King Jr., but I mean, he is like one of the one of the great success stories of civil disobedience. So, let's not be afraid of using him as an example. And when he was using civil disobedience and direct action, it was not popular with, when they did polls, asking what if people approved of what, he was doing. It didn't have the majority support. But we don't need the support of the majority. I know that sounds kind of like not a very democratic thing to say, but we just need a good number of people that really care.
Yeah, I don't want to get too far into political science or anything like that, but I know exactly what you're talking about. I mean, there's a certain threshold of people. Once that threshold is hit, change is going to come. So, I think you guys are on the right path. Nic, I'm going to have to leave it there, man. I know you got to go, and I appreciate everything you're doing and going down there and pass on our love to everybody else who came down there with you and everybody there doing what they're doing. I can give you another minute if you want to have a closing word on this.
Well, thank you, Michael. Thank you for, spending some time to share what's going on at Standing Rock.
My pleasure.
I guess what I would say is, what do we have to gain from this pipeline being built? I don't think that there's any environmental gains. There's too many risks when it comes to the environment. I don't think that if we look at the societal impact it will have on people that have been oppressed. We think it's just in the history books. It's a long time ago the Native Americans and the first people have been oppressed. It's still happening now. It's really scary to see actually how overtly racist some here in North Dakota are towards people that expect to be allies of the indigenous people when they come into supermarkets and things like that. It's they won't serve people from this camp at Bernard's, which is kind of like a Lowe's. It's pretty. It's stunning. It's something you would think you would only see in like the 60s or the 50s, deep South. It's very real. It's very palpable, and I don't think it makes any economic sense. Several studies have shown that this is probably going to make 30 permanent jobs. So who is this benefiting? I don't think that we're going to see. I don't think this is going to have the economic, societal, or environmental impact that I don't know. Some people might think we might get from this pipeline.
Definitely not. Nic, again, thanks a lot, man. I appreciate it. Go out there and keep doing what you're doing, man. And, we'll see if we can get you guys some help and support.
I won't keep you. Peace.
All right. Peace.
Time left tonight for our weekly Shame and Fame. First up, this week's Shame. This week's shame goes to Alpha Natural Resources, ongoing target of our wrath, as you will. Alpha Natural Resources recently went into bankruptcy a year ago. After filing bankruptcy, they requested a $12.9 million executive performance payout. This follows after they laid off approximately half of their 8,000 worker payroll before going into bankruptcy. One of the tactics of the coal industry over the past 20 years has been to pay off Virginia and other state legislators through campaign donations in order for state paybacks. In the case of Virginia, it was a $460 million tax credit to the coal industry since 1994 through 2014. This week, Alpha Natural Resources was in the news today, the Charleston Gazette-Mail, that says that $100 million in unaccounted for liabilities put Alpha mine cleanups at risk. Now, what this means is that by law, coal companies are required to clean up the environmental leftovers of their mining operations. But what the coal industry has done over the past decade or so is that they have divested themselves of not only these environmental cleanup responsibilities, but their worker pension responsibilities as well. So they split the liabilities of the company while retaining the assets. And so the companies that are responsible for these liabilities have no income and they go bankrupt. And so the worker pensions are at risk and the environmental cleanups are at risk. So according to the Gazette, fewer than 4 months after emerging from bankruptcy, Alpha Natural Resources has revealed $100 million in what it calls, quote, unaccounted for obligations, end quote. State regulators worry put the company at further risk of financial failure. This increased fears about there being adequate money available to complete proper reclamation on hundreds of Alpha mining permits across West Virginia. In a court filing last week, West Virginia Department of Environmental Protection lawyer Kevin Barnett referred to the amount of Alpha's unaccounted for obligations as, quote, whopping, saying the issue is devastating and seriously threatens the reorganized company's ability to perform its legal obligations to reclaim mining sites. We've got a lot of information that we've written previously on Medium about Alpha Natural Resources and the coal tax subsidies that we'll link in the show notes. Regular listeners may recall we rant on this often, but the war on coal is over. That's what I have to say about that. It's not Obama that killed it. It was other sources of energy. Natural gas has killed it. Fracking boom has killed it. Solar is killing it. And promises that Trump made to western part of the state and other areas like Kentucky and Tennessee, that he's going to, quote, bring back coal jobs, just another empty promise that's going to go unfulfilled. And it will be telling to see what happens when he does fail, because he will. Whether, people that gave him a chance will recognize it or will find some other scapegoat to blame. So we'll see. And as usual, we like to finish the show on a happy note. So here's this week's fame. Probably not too much of a happy note to say. We do want to give credit to Governor McAuliffe. The Commonwealth of Virginia has declared the state's opioid addiction crisis a public health emergency. Now, this was reported all over the state. We're reading from the Loudoun Times. Governor Terry McAuliffe's office announced a declaration on Monday, the 21st, saying that it comes in response to the growing number of overdoses attributed to opiate use. Too many families across Virginia and the nation are dealing with heartbreak and loss as a result of prescription opioid and heroin abuse epidemic. We cannot stand by while these drugs harm our communities and our economy. By the end of 2016, opioid overdose deaths are expected to increase 77% over 5 years ago. In response to the troubling trend, State Health Commissioner Dr. Marissa J. Levine has issued a standing order that allows all Virginians to obtain the drug Naxalone, which can be used to treat narcotic overdoses in emergency situations. The standing order serves as a prescription written for the general public rather than specifically for an individual, removing a barrier to access. Naxalone is an overdose preventative. So that is great news. So kudos to the governor for making this declaration. Hopefully it will have a positive impact on the opioid addiction epidemic in Virginia. We would like to go one step further and say that decriminalization of marijuana would probably serve even better. The over-prescriptions of opioids being the main reason for the opioid addiction epidemic and heroin epidemic. By allowing the use of medical marijuana for pain management, Virginia could see a steep decrease in the amount of opioid overdoses in the Commonwealth. Well, that's all the time we've got for this week. We appreciate everyone that's tuned in. Thank you for your support and all your shares. Please check our website, share us on social media, and your financial support is always appreciated. This is the For Virginia Podcast, episode 14. Please submit your feedback on our website, on Facebook, or by emailing info@forvirginia.org. We'll continue working hard to bring you the news, information, and analysis to help keep the progressive revolution moving forward in Virginia through 2017. My name is Michael Brandon Wade. Thank you, and we'll see you next week.